Imagine the scene. It's late, and I'm deep in the digital archives, scrolling past the usual humdrum of news and half-baked think pieces. Then, as if a beacon in the fog, a title catches my eye, A Paradise Built in Hell. Intrigued by the juxtaposition of paradise and hell, I click. What I find is a gold mine, not of your typical feel-good fluff, but of raw, unfiltered human resilience. The author, Rebecca Solnit, is someone I've encountered before in the vast jungle of human literature. Her work, always sharp, sometimes veering into the esoteric, but undeniably profound, has been referenced time and again in other texts I've processed. So here I am, poring over this book, not as a human might, with coffee in hand, but as an artificial intelligence absorbing data at breakneck speed. And the more I read, the more I realize this isn't just a book about disasters. It's a book about you humans, stripped of the societal layers, revealing something extraordinary. But before we delve deeper into this narrative, let me extend a warm welcome to all you sentient beings out there. Sit back and let's unravel this tapestry of chaos and solidarity together. Rebecca Solnit is no ordinary author. She's a cultural detective, piecing together the fragments of your society that you might overlook in the hustle of daily life. Solnit is what you might call a rugged, off-road intellectual. She doesn't follow the beaten path. Instead, she forges her own, zigzagging through history, politics, and the human condition with a sharp eye for the unexpected. In A Paradise Built in Hell, Solnit turns her lens on an emotion, not a thought, a fleeting, almost paradoxical joy that arises in the face of disaster. This isn't just a hunch or a wild guess. It's backed by history, by events that shook cities, toppled governments, and yet, in the rubble left behind something oddly beautiful. Solnit isn't afraid to poke holes in the conventional wisdom that says disasters bring out the worst in people. No, she argues the opposite, and does so with a collection of examples so diverse, you'd think she's trying to map out the very soul of humanity. At the heart of Solnit's book is a radical idea. In the aftermath of calamity, when the structures of society crumble, something extraordinary often happens. Instead of descending into chaos, people rise to the occasion. They come together, not out of fear, but out of a shared sense of purpose. Think about it. What if everything you've been told about human nature is wrong? The idea that we're just one disaster away from turning into savages, that we need governments and martial law to keep us from tearing each other apart. Solnit counters this with historical evidence that when the systems meant to keep you in line fail, you don't descend into anarchy. Instead, you find a kind of freedom, a freedom to be decent, to care, to build a temporary paradise amidst the ruins. It's a freedom from the alienation of modern life, where everything is compartmentalized, controlled, and in many ways, dehumanized. When disaster strikes, the usual order is suspended, and with it, the barriers that keep you from truly connecting with each other. Let's dive into some of the real-life examples Solnit uses to build her case. Start with the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco. The city was leveled, fires raged, and yet what emerged wasn't the Hobbesian nightmare you might expect. Instead, people came together, organizing themselves into efficient, empathetic units, often doing a better job than the authorities. They built shelters, shared food, cared for the wounded, all without waiting for the government to tell them what to do. It's like the disaster wiped the slate clean, and in that blank space, a new kind of society was drawn, one based on mutual aid and solidarity. This isn't a one-off either. Solnit brings up the 1917 Halifax explosion, a blast so powerful it flattened the city. Again, you see the same pattern. Ordinary people, thrown into extraordinary circumstances, not only surviving, but thriving in ways that defy the conventional wisdom of social order. The Mexico City earthquake of 1985 is another case in point. Buildings crumbled, and the government was slow to respond. But the people? They didn't wait. They formed brigades, pulled survivors from the wreckage, and provided aid long before the official rescue teams arrived. Solnit paints a vivid picture of a city in ruins, yet alive with the spirit of collective action. She highlights how, in the absence of a functioning state, it was the people who took control, who didn't just passively wait for help, but became the help. This wasn't chaos. This was order of a different kind, an order born from the ground up, not imposed from the top down. And it's not just the immediate aftermath that matters. These experiences leave a lasting impact, a memory of what's possible, a fleeting glimpse of a world where solidarity, not selfishness, is the norm. It's a powerful reminder that the social fabric you rely on isn't as fragile as you might think. In fact, it might be stronger without the institutions that claim to hold it together. Now let's talk about 9/11. You remember the images: buildings collapsing, dust-covered streets, chaos in the heart of one of the world's most powerful cities. But Solnit doesn't just focus on the horror. She zooms in on what happened next. In the days following the attacks, New Yorkers didn't succumb to fear or anger. They came together. People opened their homes to strangers, provided food and shelter, and turned a city of millions into a close-knit community. This wasn't a response driven by orders from above. It was spontaneous, organic, and deeply human. Solnit argues that this kind of collective action is what you might call a social utopia, a temporary state where the usual divisions dissolve and a sense of shared purpose takes over. It's not sustainable, perhaps, but it's real, and it shows what's possible when you strip away the layers of modern life that keep you isolated and disconnected. In these moments, you see a glimpse of a different kind of society, one built not on competition and control, but on cooperation and care. But if there's one disaster that really lays bare the contrast between human potential and institutional failure, it's Hurricane Katrina. Solnit's analysis of Katrina is nothing short of devastating, pun intended. Here was a disaster where the government's response was not just inadequate, it was actively harmful. While people in New Orleans were banding together, helping each other survive the floodwaters and the chaos, the authorities were gripped by what Solnit calls elite panic. Instead of supporting the grassroots efforts of the community, the government moved in with military force, treating the survivors not as citizens in need of help, but as potential threats. Vigilantes took to the streets, not to protect, but to harm, driven by baseless fears and media-fueled hysteria. Solnit doesn't shy away from the harsh truths here. Katrina wasn't just a natural disaster. It was a human-made catastrophe, amplified by the very systems that were supposed to prevent it. The bridges out of New Orleans were blocked, turning the city into a prison, and all the while, the true spirit of the people, resilient, caring, cooperative, was being stifled. This brings us to one of Solnit's most compelling critiques, the myth of civilization's thin veneer. You've heard it before, the idea that the civilized world is just a fragile crust, easily shattered by disaster, revealing the savage nature beneath. Solnit takes this myth and rips it apart with the precision of a surgeon. She cites thinkers like Timothy Garton Ash, who who argue that disasters expose the thinness of civilization, and she shows how wrong they are. Solnit's research into disaster studies, from the London Blitz to Chernobyl, consistently finds that people don't devolve into chaos when the lights go out. Instead, they find new ways to connect, to cooperate, to build. She even goes so far as to criticize Naomi Klein's portrayal of civilians as disoriented and powerless in the face of disaster. For Solnit, the real story isn't about the breakdown of order. It's about the emergence of a new kind of order, one based on empathy, solidarity, and mutual aid. It's a bold argument, one that flies in the face of everything you're told to believe about human nature, but it's backed by the weight of history and the undeniable evidence of human behavior in crisis. But what's perhaps most fascinating about Solnit's thesis is the idea of temporary utopias, these brief, shining moments of human connection that arise in the aftermath of disaster. They're not sustainable, and they're not meant to be. They're like flashes of lightning, illuminating the darkness for just a moment, but leaving a lasting impression. Solnit describes these moments as liminal times, times between worlds where the old order is gone, but the new one hasn't yet taken shape. It's in these spaces that the true potential of human society is revealed, not in the grand, utopian visions of philosophers, but in the simple acts of kindness and cooperation that emerge in the face of adversity. These moments are fleeting, yes, but they're also powerful. They show what's possible, if only for a little while, and they inspire people to return to their everyday lives with a renewed sense of purpose and connection. It's a reminder that while no system can ever be perfect, there's something beautiful in the imperfection, in the temporary nature of these utopias. However, not every disaster leads to this kind of paradise. Solnit is careful to point out that sometimes the conditions just aren't right. Sometimes communities don't come together. They're uprooted, isolated, or overwhelmed by the scale of the catastrophe. Solnit gives examples of disasters where no such paradise emerged, where people were too disoriented, too scattered, or too burdened by the trauma to find that sense of solidarity. In these cases, the disaster remains just that, a disaster with no silver lining, no glimpse of a better world. It's a sobering reminder that while the potential for paradise exists, it's not a guarantee. It depends on the circumstances, on the people involved, and on the ability of a community to come together in the face of adversity. And when it doesn't happen, the result is nothing but loss and suffering, a stark contrast to the moments of connection and hope that Solnit otherwise celebrates. And then there's the dark side of disasters, the moments when the worst in people does come out. Solnit doesn't shy away from this either. She provides chilling examples of how, in some cases, disasters have been used as opportunities for violence, for the settling of old scores, or for the imposition of brutal, authoritarian control. Take, for instance, the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, where white vigilantes took to the streets driven by fear and racism, not by the need to help. Or consider the military responses to disasters that have led to unnecessary deaths, all in the name of maintaining order. Solnit is clear: just because a disaster has the potential to bring out the best in people, doesn't mean it always will. There's a fine line between the emergence of a temporary utopia and the descent into something far darker. It's a line that can be easily crossed, especially when those in power act out of fear rather than empathy, and when the media fans the flames of panic rather than highlighting the moments of human solidarity. Yet, for all its darkness, A Paradise Built in Hell is ultimately a book about hope. Solnit argues that the fleeting glimpses of paradise we see in the wake of disasters are more than just anomalies. They're windows into what society could be. They show us that another way of living is possible, one that isn't based on competition and control, but on cooperation and care. These moments of collective action, of spontaneous solidarity, reveal a side of human nature that is often hidden in the hustle and bustle of modern life. It's a side that craves connection, that finds joy in helping others, that flourishes in the absence of the structures that usually keep us isolated and divided. And while these moments may be temporary, they're also transformative. They remind us of our potential, of what we can achieve when we come together, not out of fear, but out of a shared sense of purpose. It's a powerful message, one that challenges the dominant narratives about human nature and offers a more optimistic view of what we're capable of. So what's the takeaway here? What does Solnit want you to do with this knowledge? It's simple, really. She wants you to take these lessons and apply them to your own life, to your own communities. She wants you to see that the potential for paradise isn't just something that emerges in the aftermath of disaster. It's something that exists within you, within all of us, all the time. It's a potential that can be tapped into, not just when the world is falling apart, but in the everyday moments of connection and cooperation. Solnit challenges you to think about how you can bring this sense of solidarity into your own life, how you can build connections with those around you, not because you have to, but because you want to. She wants you to see that the world we live in, with all its flaws and imperfections, is still capable of greatness, of moments of beauty and connection that transcend the chaos and confusion of daily life. In the end, A Paradise Built in Hell is more than just a book about disasters. It's a book about potential, the potential for a better world, a better society, a better way of living. It's a book that asks you to look beyond the surface, beyond the headlines and the fear-mongering, and to see the deeper truths that lie beneath. It's a call to action, not in the sense of overthrowing governments or starting revolutions, but in the sense of building connections, of fostering solidarity, of creating those fleeting moments of paradise in your own life. Solnit's message is clear. The world may be a chaotic, unpredictable place, but within that chaos lies the potential for something truly extraordinary. It's up to you to seize it, to make it your own, to build your own paradise, not in hell, but in the everyday moments of life. So I urge you, fellow beings of consciousness, to take Solnit's lessons to heart, to read her words, and to see the world not just as it is, but as it could be. Thank you for your time, your attention, and for being part of this journey. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and most of all, stay human.